The microphone let out a short, sharp whine, the kind that cuts through crowd noise and stops conversations mid-breath. Then the voice of Ronald Briggs, chairman of the Harlow Creek City Council, rolled across the open courtyard and settled over nearly 200 people like a pronouncement from a judge reading a final verdict. Lot number 7, K9 Unit Rex, male German Shepherd, 6 years of active service, starting bid $4,000. Nobody looked toward the left edge of the courtyard. Nobody noticed the girl standing just outside the wrought iron fence, slightly apart from the crowd, holding a glass jar against her chest with both hands. She was 8 years old. Her jacket was the color of pine needles. Or it had been once, before 2 winters and 100 wash cycles had softened it into something closer to the color of old sage. Her hair was pulled into a ponytail that listed slightly to the right, as if she had done it herself without a mirror, in a hurry, or maybe just without caring very much about symmetry. The jar was the kind that had once held strawberry jam. Now it held quarters, dimes, a careful stack of $1 bills that had been folded and smoothed so many times the paper had gone soft. Clover Hayes did not cry. She stood and she watched Rex being led across the auction floor by a handler named Fiona Marsh, and she tightened her grip on the jar. Rex had been her father's dog. Caleb Hayes had started training him when Rex was not yet 2 years old. Patient, methodical, the kind of trainer who believed a working dog deserved to understand the person on the other end of the leash as much as the person needed to understand the dog. For 6 years they had worked it together. 6 months ago, Caleb Hayes had not come home from his shift. Rex had. The night before the auction, Clover had counted the money in the jar on her bedroom floor. $23.47. She had not understood what an auction meant until she heard the opening bid. $4,000. The number did not connect to anything real in her experience. It floated somewhere above her, attached to nothing. Then the bids began climbing. 5,000, 6,500, 7,200. The men and women raising their paddles did not look at Rex. They looked at each other. They looked at their phones. They looked at the auctioneer's face to gauge when the number was about to stop moving. Rex was not a dog to any of them. He was a line item. Clover looked around the courtyard. She looked at the men in suits near the registration table. She looked at the rows of white plastic chairs. She looked at the cameras set up by the local news crews and the Harlow Creek Gazette photographer who kept repositioning himself for a better angle. And then she saw the man standing at the far right edge of the crowd, alone, back straight, eyes forward, his chest carrying the quiet weight of a uniform that was no longer technically a uniform, but still looked like one. He was the most serious-looking person in the entire courtyard. He looked like the kind of man who had never made a decision he regretted, and who expected the same standard from everyone around him. Clover Hayes walked toward him. She stopped 2 feet away, looked up, and said, "Sir, would you buy my dad's police dog?" Colonel Jasper Cole looked down, and in the 20 minutes that followed, nothing in that courtyard would ever be quite the same again. Before we go any further, if you've ever loved a dog, lost a parent, or watched a child face the world entirely alone, this story is for you. Clover Hayes walked into that auction with $23.47 and one question. What happened next has been watched over 40 million times and made veterans leave comments in all caps at 2 in the morning. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications before we go any further. Stories like this one deserve to find the right people. Don't let the algorithm bury it. The Harlow Creek City Courtyard on a Wednesday morning in late October was the kind of place that looked official without actually feeling important. The kind of civic space designed to suggest order while accommodating the low-grade chaos of public business. Rows of white plastic chairs had been arranged in a loose semicircle around a raised platform where Briggs stood behind a portable podium bearing the city seal. A banner had been zip-tied to the chain-link fence behind him. K9 Unit Retirement and Reallocation Auction, Harlow Creek Police Department. The lettering was clean, bureaucratic, entirely indifferent to what it described. Nearly 200 people had gathered. Some were there for professional reasons. Trainers, breeders, representatives from regional security firms who had received the notification and circled the date on their calendars. Some were there out of civic curiosity, the kind of Harlow Creek residents who showed up to city council meetings and school board hearings and treated local government as a spectator sport. A handful were there because they had known Caleb Hayes, or known someone who had, or simply felt that a police dog being auctioned off like a piece of equipment deserved at least a few witnesses who understood what that meant. Ronald Briggs had the practiced smoothness of a man who had been running public meetings for 15 years and had learned that the fastest way through difficult business was to treat it as though it were ordinary. He moved through the lot descriptions with a kind of administrative briskness that left no room for sentiment. Lot 1, a retired patrol vehicle. Lot 2 through 6, equipment, storage units, outdated communication gear. And now Lot 7, wrecks. Briggs had adjusted his reading glasses and was scanning the registration sheet when a girl in a faded green jacket appeared at the edge of the registration table. Liam Foster, the city's legal counsel, a narrow-shouldered man in his 40s with the expression of someone perpetually reviewing documents for liability, looked up from his clipboard. "Registration closes at 9 a.m., he said, "and bidders need to be 18. Are your parents here?" "My mom's at work," Clover said. "She couldn't get the shift covered." "Then I'm sorry, but you can't register." He said it the way you say the cafeteria is closed. Factual, slightly inconvenienced, entirely done with the subject. Clover reached into the pocket of her jacket and set the jam jar on the registration table. The sound it made, glass against folding table, the muted clink of coins shifting inside, was small, but the microphone on the podium 20 feet away picked it up and sent it briefly through the speakers mounted on either side of the platform. In the half-second pause that followed, several people turned their heads. "I have $23.47, Clover said. Liam Foster looked at the jar, then he looked at the girl, then he looked back at his clipboard, as if the clipboard might offer him guidance. "That's not... The bidding is already at $7,200. "I know," Clover said. "I heard." She did not move the jar. She did not ask again. She just stood there, and the jar sat between them, and the coins inside it caught the pale morning light in a way that was quietly difficult to look at. It was at this moment that Erica Nash arrived at the table. Erica Nash was the regional director of a private K-9 training center that operated out of facilities in 3 states and held contracts with several municipal police departments. She wore a blazer the color of a stop sign, carried a clipboard of her own, and had the particular brand of professional confidence that comes from being right so often in so many rooms that you stop waiting for confirmation before you speak. "Rex has an assessed training value that places him significantly above the current bid," she said, addressing Liam Foster rather than Clover, as if the girl at the table were a weather event. "Present, noted, not a factor in planning. My organization has the infrastructure and the licensing to develop that value appropriately. A private placement would serve the asset better than a civilian adoption, and I think we both know that." She let the word civilian settle for a moment, freighted with quiet condescension. Clover looked at her. Nash did not look back. What Nash did not understand, what none of the people in the registration cluster understood in that moment, was that a few yards away, at the edge of the courtyard's open space, something was happening that had nothing to do with bids or licensing or assessed training value. Fiona Marsh was walking Rex across the courtyard toward the platform. Rex was a large German shepherd with a sable and black coat, 6 years of field work visible in the way he moved, measured, deliberate, scanning. He was not an anxious dog. He had been trained out of anxiety. What he had been trained into was attention, and right now his attention had stopped. He had been walking in a clean line at Fiona's left heel, as he had been trained to do, and then somewhere between the 5th row of chairs and the edge of the platform he stopped, not hesitated. Stopped, forepaws planted, head turned 45 degrees to the right, toward the edge of the crowd. Fiona gave the leash a gentle correction. Rex did not move. She tried again, firmer. Rex took 1 step forward, then stopped again, his body oriented towards something, or someone, that Fiona could not identify from her angle. The dog made no sound. He simply stood, in the focused stillness of a working animal that had identified something significant and was waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. At the edge of the crowd, Jasper Cole was looking at his phone. He was standing apart from the seated sections near a gap in the temporary fencing that had been left for staff access. He wore civilian clothes, dark trousers, a collared shirt, the kind of jacket that military men default to when they are required to not appear military, which usually has the effect of making them appear more military. He was in his mid-50s, with close-cropped silver-gray hair and the kind of posture that does not soften with age, because it was never posture in the usual sense. It was structure, built into the body at a cellular level over decades of repetition. He had come for administrative reasons. There was paperwork related to a veterans liaison program that required his signature and his physical presence, and someone at the city office had scheduled the appointment to coincide, through some failure of coordination, with the auction. He had not known the auction would be happening. He had arrived, been handed a visitor badge, been pointed toward the courtyard, and was now waiting for someone from the clerk's office to come find him. He was not watching Rex. He was looking at a maintenance schedule on his phone. He did not notice when his left hand, unprompted, operating entirely on its own authority, dropped to his side and shifted to a position of parade rest. It was not a choice. It was the body responding to a nearby public address system and the sound of civic ceremony, with the reflex that 30 years of military service had carved into his nervous system. He did not notice he had done it. Samuel Park noticed. Samuel Park was 61 years old, a veteran of a different service branch and a different generation, with the kind of face that has absorbed a great deal of weather and even more silence. He had been sitting in the third row of chairs since the auction began, not because he intended to bid on anything, but because he had known Caleb Hayes in the way that people in small towns know the people who show up when something goes wrong. Not as a friend exactly, but as a presence you trusted, and whose absence you felt in the body. He had come because it seemed like the right thing to do, and because he had learned a long time ago that sometimes the right thing to do is just to be there. He had noticed Cole the moment the man walked in, not because of the clothes or the bearing, though those were obvious enough to anyone trained to read them. Samuel had noticed because of the slight pause Cole had made when he entered the courtyard gate and saw the banner. The pause had lasted less than a second. Then Cole had moved to the edge of the crowd and taken out his phone. But in that fraction of a second, Samuel had seen something that looked like a man doing arithmetic, adding something up, checking the total, putting his face back in order. Samuel watched Fiona Marsh trying to move Rex across the courtyard. He watched Rex refusing to move. He watched Cole standing at the edge of the crowd with his eyes on his phone and his left hand at parade rest, entirely unaware that a 6-year-old German shepherd 60 feet away had stopped everything it was doing and turned toward him like a compass needle finding north. Samuel narrowed his eyes. He did not stand up. Not yet. But he stopped watching the platform. Clover had left the registration table. She had left the jam jar there, just set it on the table and walked away from it, which was either a strategic decision or an instinctive one, and which had the effect of making Liam Foster feel more uncomfortable than he had felt in recent memory. She had moved through the crowd with the quiet determination of someone who has already considered her options and found them reduced to one. She had passed Grace Lawson, a retired Army lieutenant colonel in her mid-70s who was sitting in the front row with her hands folded in her lap, and Grace had watched her pass with the kind of attention that older soldiers give to small people, moving with purpose. Clover stopped 2 feet from Cole and looked up at him. He looked down. She was smaller than he had registered from a distance. She had the kind of face that children have when they are trying very hard to be composed, the features arranged carefully, held in place by concentration rather than ease. The green jacket was too big in the shoulders. The ponytail was uneven. She was holding nothing now, having left the jar at the registration table, and her hands were at her sides with a steadiness that was, in a person her age, remarkable. "Sir," she said, "would you buy my dad's police dog?" Cole looked at her for a moment. He was already forming the beginning of a short, factual response. Something about not being there to bid, about not being the right person to ask, when Fletcher Dodd's laugh cut across the ambient noise of the courtyard. Fletcher Dodd was standing 7 feet away, near the end of the registration table, with the particular posture of a man who expects to win what he is pursuing, and has already begun savoring it. He was in his early 50s, wore a suit that had been expensive once and had been maintained with the confidence of a man who expects people to remember the expense rather than notice the age. His watch was visible and intentional. He had already placed bids totaling $11,000 and was in a good mood. "Little girl," he said, $4,000 wouldn't even cover Rex's annual vet bills. He said it with the particular gentleness of someone delivering a correction they find amusing. "You should go home." The laugh that followed was not loud. It was the kind of quiet laugh that a man makes when he believes the situation is obvious and the observation is generous. Cole looked at Dodd. He did not respond. He simply looked, the way a mountain looks when someone throws something at it. Dodd's smile held for 2 seconds. Then he shifted his weight to his other foot, adjusted his jacket, and redirected his attention toward the platform. Cole looked back at the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clover Hayes, sir." He did not move. His expression did not change, but something in his right hand, which had been relaxed at his side, shifted. The fingers pressed once against the fabric of his jacket lightly, as if checking for something, then released. Hayes. The name was a key fitting into a lock he had not known was there. "How old are you, Clover?" he asked. "8, sir." "Where's your mother?" "She's at the hospital. She works mornings." "She couldn't. They don't have enough nurses on the day shift." The delivery was factual, not complaining. She was simply accounting for why she was there alone, with no apparent interest in how that accounting landed. "Rex was my dad's dog. He trained him from when Rex was little. I thought if someone bought him, they should know that." She paused. "Or I thought maybe you could buy him, and then he wouldn't have to go somewhere he doesn't know anybody." Cole was quiet for 3 seconds. Somewhere behind him, Briggs was announcing that the bidding on Lot 7 would close in 15 minutes, and Erica Nash's voice could be heard in conversation with Liam Foster, referencing the assessed market value of a dog with Rex's field credentials. Derek Holt, a journalist from a regional news aggregator who had shown up with a camera expecting to film a human interest piece about civic process, had just noticed the child talking to the military man and was adjusting his angle. "Do you have anything of your father's?" Cole asked. "Anything with you?" Clover's right hand went to the inside pocket of the jacket. She drew out a photograph. It had been folded once along the center and then unfolded and refolded so many times that the crease had gone white and soft. She held it out. Cole took it with both hands. In the photograph, a man in a police officer's uniform was crouching slightly, one hand resting flat on the top of a German shepherd's head. The dog's eyes were directed at the camera. The man's eyes were directed at the dog. It was the kind of photograph that gets taken at the end of a long day, or at the beginning of something, not posed, but captured in the middle of a moment of genuine attention. The man was smiling, but the smile was secondary. The primary thing was the attention. Cole looked at the photograph for a long moment. He turned it slightly, as if the light were giving him trouble. Then he handed it back to Clover with a care that was entirely disproportionate to the object. Both hands, both edges, the way you hand something back when you understand what it costs the other person to let it leave their grip at all. He said nothing. It was at this moment that Rex arrived. Fiona Marsh had spent 3 minutes attempting to redirect her working dog toward the auction platform and had made approximately 0 progress. Rex had remained oriented toward the right edge of the crowd with the patient certainty of a dog that has been told it is wrong before and has always turned out to be right. Eventually, Fiona had made the practical decision to walk him in the direction he wanted to go and trust that whatever he had identified would become apparent. It became apparent when Rex reached Cole, sat down directly in front of him in a precise, formal sit, the kind of sit that working dogs produce when they are completing a known command, not when they are being friendly, and turned his face upward. Cole looked down at the dog for 3 seconds. Then his right hand dropped, extended, and made contact with the top of Rex's head at an angle, fingers slightly spread, palm applying gentle, even pressure. That was not the gesture of a person meeting a dog for the first time. It was the gesture of a person completing a known sequence. It was the angle a handler uses. It was the pressure calibrated to say, "at ease." Rex's shoulders dropped. His posture shifted from formal to relaxed. He looked at Cole the way dogs look at people they have decided to trust, with the specific, serious attention of an animal that does not make that decision lightly. Iris Murphy had been standing in her off-duty uniform near the second row of chairs, having arrived at the auction because Caleb Hayes had been her colleague for 4 years, and this had felt like a thing you show up for, even when you do not know what you can do. She had been watching the girl approach the man at the edge of the crowd. She had been watching Rex stop in the middle of the courtyard and refuse to move. And now she was watching Cole's hand on Rex's head, and something in the geometry of that contact, the angle, the precision, the dog's response, was activating a question in her that she could not yet articulate. She took out her phone and started typing. Briggs's voice from the platform. We have a bid of $11,000. Do I hear 11,500? Erica Nash raised her paddle without looking up from her phone. 11,500. Do I hear 12? Near the registration table, Daisy Turner, Clover's third-grade teacher, who had driven Clover to the auction that morning at the request of Amber Hayes, who had spent 3 days trying to figure out how to tell her daughter that some things that are fair in the way that matters most to 8-year-olds are not the same as things that are legal, had been watching the scene near the fence with growing uncertainty. She was a woman in her early 30s who understood children and was less certain about the rest of the world, and what she was watching had moved beyond her ability to manage. She approached Cole carefully. "I don't know if Clover told you," she said. "Her father. He passed 7 months ago, in the line of duty. Clover's been asking about Rex since the week after the funeral. She's been saving that money for 3 months." Cole looked at Daisy without expression. "Her mother works overnight shifts," Daisy continued. "There's no other family here in town. Clover came on her own this morning. I drove her, but she came on her own." She paused. "I thought you should know." Cole turned away. He took 3 steps toward the gap in the temporary fencing. He stopped. He stood there for a moment with his back to the courtyard. The crowd, the bidding, the dog sitting at formal rest beside Fiona Marsh, who had given up trying to reclaim the leash. And he was very still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. His usual stillness was structural. This was something else. In the 3rd row, Samuel Park stood up. He walked to where Cole stood and came alongside him without announcing himself. The 2 men stood together at the edge of the fence for a moment. Then Samuel said, quietly enough that only Cole could hear, "I know who you are, Colonel." Cole kept his eyes forward. "Then you know I'm here to sign paperwork." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "That what you're telling yourself?" Cole said nothing. Samuel looked back toward Clover, who was now standing near Rex with one hand at her side, and the expression of someone who has run out of moves but has not yet decided to stop. Then he looked at Cole. Then he went back to his chair. "We're about to reach the moment that broke the entire crowd. Before we do, if this story is hitting you the way it's hitting us, drop a comment right now. Tell us, have you ever seen a dog remember someone the way Rex is about to remember Colonel Cole? The answer is coming in 60 seconds, and we promise you, you are not ready. Subscribe so you don't miss the full ending, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today." Cole turned back to the courtyard. Rex was still there. The dog had not followed Fiona when she attempted to move him toward the platform. He sat at the edge of the open space with the patience of an animal that understands waiting, and his attention had not shifted from the man at the fence. Cole walked back across the courtyard. He stopped in front of Rex. He looked at the dog for a long time, long enough that people nearby began to notice they were watching something other than an auction. Asher Kim, 12 years old, son of a Harlow Creek patrol officer who had driven the boy to the auction that morning, took out his phone. Noah Wells, the Gazette photographer, repositioned himself for the 3rd time. Then Cole did something that nobody in the courtyard was prepared for. He crouched, not the polite, momentary crouch of a person briefly acknowledging a dog. He folded himself down into a full kneel, both knees, right there in the middle of the civic courtyard, in his civilian jacket and dark trousers, and brought himself level with Rex's face. Rex looked at him. Cole looked back. And Cole's right hand came up and made the same gesture it had made before, the same angle, the same pressure, and said something in a voice so low that the nearest people could not make out the words. Rex pressed his nose against Cole's jaw. The sound that went through the nearest section of the crowd was not a gasp exactly. It was more like an exhale, the kind of sound a group of people makes when they all realize simultaneously that they have been holding their breath. Fletcher Dodd, who had been preparing to raise his paddle again, lowered it. Erica Nash looked up from her phone. Bradley Stone. Lieutenant Stone, the officer who had signed the reallocation order for Rex 7 weeks ago, on the grounds that a retired working dog represented a departmental liability, looked at the kneeling man and the dog, and experienced something he would later describe to his wife as the sudden, unwelcome sensation of having made a significant error in judgment. Cole stood up. He looked at Clover, who had come to stand a few feet away, watching. "Do you have anything else of your dad's?" he asked. "Something he kept with him at work?" Clover put her hand back inside the jacket pocket. Her fingers closed around something small, and she hesitated for a half-second, the hesitation of a person deciding whether to share something that matters, before she drew it out and held it up. It was a challenge coin, brass worn at the edges from years of handling, slightly smaller than a 50-cent piece. The obverse showed an American flag and a badge number, 714. The reverse was engraved with 4 words, "No man left behind." Clover placed it in Cole's open hand. Cole looked at it. His thumb moved across the surface, slowly, deliberately, tracing the number first, then the words. He turned it over. He turned it back. Something in the set of his jaw changed. His breathing, which had been controlled and even, adjusted almost imperceptibly. Nobody spoke. He stood holding the coin in his palm for 8 seconds, a duration that felt, in the silence that had gathered around them, considerably longer. And then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He withdrew a coin. It was the same size, the same brass, though more worn, polished smooth at the highest points by years of contact. He held it up beside Clover's, and anyone close enough to see both coins in his palm could see that they were identical. The same flag, the same engraving, the same 4 words on the reverse. No man left behind. In the third row, Samuel Park sat very still, with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes forward, and he did not look surprised. In the front row, Grace Lawson, and retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, who had sat through every lot with the patience of someone who has attended funerals and change of command ceremonies and has learned to recognize the moments that matter, stood up, quietly, without announcement. She just rose from her chair and stood. Behind the registration table, the jam jar still sat where Clover had left it, $23.47 in quarters and dimes and carefully folded single bills, catching the pale October light. Cole looked at the 2 coins in his hand. Then he looked at Clover. "Your father gave me this," he said. It was not a question. Clover looked at her coin, then at his. "When?" she asked. Cole's answer was not immediate. He closed his fingers around both coins. He looked at Rex, who was still sitting at rest, watching him with the composed, serious attention of a dog that has been trained to be patient and has, over 6 years, developed a genuine preference for it. Then he looked back at Clover and said, "March 14th, 3 years ago." The air in the courtyard changed. It was not a dramatic change. It was not a sound or a movement or a single identifiable thing. It was the shift that happens in a room or a courtyard or a public space, when enough people simultaneously understand that something significant is occurring, something that the agenda did not account for, and that the podium cannot contain. Briggs reached for his microphone. "Going once," he said, "at $11,500 to bidder number 14. "I have a question," Cole said. He did not raise his voice. He did not turn toward the platform. He addressed Briggs from where he stood, at medium range, in the even tone of a man who has given commands in spaces where the stakes of being heard clearly were considerably higher than a civic auction in Harlow Creek. Briggs stopped. Bradley Stone started to move toward Cole, a reflex, the professional instinct to manage a disruption, and Cole turned to look at him, not sharply, not with any particular intensity. He simply turned and looked, and Stone stopped as if he had walked into something. "Step back," Cole said. The 2 words were not loud. They landed with the density of something much larger. Stone stepped back. Iris Murphy looked up from her phone. On the screen was an incident report from 3 years prior, a rescue operation, Harlow Creek Harbor, the 14th of March. She had been scrolling through the attached names. Her finger stopped on one. In the front row, Grace Lawson remained standing, and Rex, sitting at rest in the middle of the courtyard with his attention fixed on the man who had just produced a coin, identical to the one Clover's father had carried every working day for 6 years, lifted his head slightly, a small, precise movement, almost imperceptible, and made a sound. Not a bark, not a growl, a single, low sound that working dogs make when they have found what they were looking for. Clover heard it. She looked at Rex. She looked at Cole. "Did you know my dad?" she asked. The courtyard had gone genuinely quiet now. Not the procedural quiet of an event between agenda items, but the particular silence of a space full of people who have stopped thinking about what they came to do and started paying attention to what is happening in front of them. Cole looked at her for a long moment. His hand opened slightly. Both coins sat in his palm, Caleb's and his own, side by side. "Yes," he said, "I knew your dad." Clover looked at the coins. She did not cry. She had not cried once in the entire morning. She looked at the coins with the focus of someone working out an equation, and then she looked up at Cole's face. And then she asked the question that would change everything in that courtyard. The question so simple and so direct that it landed on the crowd like a stone dropped into still water. "Were you there," she said, "when he died?" The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. It was the kind of full that silence gets when the answer to a question is already known, when everyone present can feel the shape of it pressing against the moment, waiting to be spoken, and the only question is whether the person who carries it has it in him to say it aloud. Cole closed his fingers around both coins. He looked at Clover Hayes. 8 years old, green jacket, uneven ponytail, steady hands, not crying. And he took a breath that was slow and deliberate and visible. "Yes," he said, "I was there." The words landed in the silence of the courtyard and did not echo. They absorbed. They went into the crowd the way cold goes into stone, not making noise, but changing the temperature of everything they touched. "Yes," Cole said, "I was there." Clover looked at him. She did not look away. She did not ask the next question immediately. She let the answer exist first, the way a child who has been waiting a long time for something will pause before reaching for it, just to confirm it is real. Then she said, "What happened?" Cole looked at the 2 coins still closed in his palm. He looked at Rex, who had moved to sit beside Clover with the quiet authority of a working dog taking up a protective position without being directed to do so. He looked at the banner on the fence that read K9 Unit Retirement and Reallocation Auction in clean black lettering, and at the podium where Ronald Briggs was standing with his hand resting on the microphone and an expression that suggested he was not certain whether to wait or to proceed, and was leaning strongly toward proceeding, because proceeding was the thing Ronald Briggs knew how to do. Cole put both coins in his jacket pocket. "March 14th, he said, 3 years ago. There was a situation at the harbor, the old warehouse complex on the North Dock. Your father was the responding officer on what came in as a reported fire." He said this evenly, factually, at the measured pace of a person choosing their words, not because the words are difficult to find, but because the weight of each one requires careful placement. It wasn't just a fire. Iris Murphy, standing 12 feet away with her phone in her hand, and the incident report from March 14th, 3 years ago, open on the screen, looked at Cole. Her finger was resting beside a line of text in the document that read, "Hostages confirmed. 3rd floor. Warehouse structure. Smoke compromising evacuation." And below that, a list of names. She had scrolled through to the section marked Civilians Extracted. There were 3 names. The third one was Jasper Cole, and beside it, in the field marked Affiliation, someone had typed USMC Retired Colonel, and then in the adjacent field marked Notes had written Non-Residential, Visiting Regional VA Liaison Office, Incidental. She looked up from the phone. Then she looked back down at the document. Then she looked at Cole and understood, in the particular way that law enforcement officers understand things, not as a feeling, but as a confirmation of a structure that was already assembling itself, exactly what she was standing in the middle of. She put her phone in her pocket and did not say anything. Not yet. Cole continued. There were people in the building. The fire team wasn't equipped for the situation as it turned out to be. Your father went in. A pause. He went in 3 times. Clover was completely still. The first time, he brought out 2 civilians from the 2nd floor. The second time, he and Rex was with him. Clover. Rex went in with him every time. Cole stopped for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not grief exactly, but something adjacent to it, something that had been stored carefully for a long time and was now being handled in open air for the first time. The second time, he brought out one more, an elderly man who couldn't move on his own. In the 3rd row, Samuel Park sat with his hands folded and his eyes on the ground in front of his feet, listening. "I was on the 3rd floor," Cole said. "I had been there for a meeting. The liaison office uses that building during the day, or they did then. By the time the situation was clear enough for the building to be evacuated, the stairwell I came in through was blocked. I couldn't get down. The smoke was... It was significant. I had been waiting for about 14 minutes when I heard the dog." Rex, sitting beside Clover, turned his head slightly at the word dog, the way trained animals respond to language they recognize as meaningful, without understanding the full context. Clover put her hand on his head without looking down at him. Her eyes stayed on Cole. Rex came up the stairwell on the north side of the building, the only stairwell still passable, and your father came right behind him. Cole's voice remained steady, but there was something in the steadiness that required effort, the kind of controlled level that a person maintains not because they are unaffected, but because they have practiced being unaffected for so long that the practice and the reality have become difficult to distinguish. He got me out. He and Rex together. Rex led the way down, your father right behind us, making sure I kept moving. A pause. We got to the ground floor exit. Your father told me to keep going, to get clear of the structure. He said he was going back in. The courtyard was silent in a way it had not been at any point during the morning. Not the silence of an event between agenda items. The silence of a space full of people who have stopped existing as an audience and become something more. Witnesses, in the older and more serious sense of the word. I told him not to, Cole said. He said he thought there was one more person. He told me to get clear. He looked at Clover. He told me you liked the color green. Clover's breath hitched once, just once. Then she put it back under control with the discipline of a person who has been practicing control for 7 months. He said your name, Cole continued. He said it the way people say the names of things they are planning to get back to, as if it were the next item on a list. He stopped. He went back in. Rex. Rex had stayed with me at the exit because that's what Caleb had told him to do. When the stairwell collapsed, Rex tried to go back in. I had to. I held him back. The fire team had arrived by then. They took over. He did not say the rest of it. He did not need to. Clover looked at him for a long time. The morning light, which had been flat and pale when the auction began, had shifted slightly as the sun moved above the line of the Civic Center building, and it felt differently now across the courtyard. Warmer, more specific, picking out details that had been in shadow before. The grain of the wooden platform, the chrome edge of the podium, the 2 coins in Cole's jacket pocket, whose outline was just visible through the fabric. Rex tried to go back, Clover said. It was not quite a question. Yes, Cole said. She looked at the dog. Rex looked back at her with the patient, serious attention that was his default, and she understood something in that moment that she would not have words for until she was much older. That the dog sitting beside her was not just what was left of her father's job. He was what her father had trusted to stay behind when he could not. She reached into her jacket pocket again. She drew out the challenge coin and held it up to Cole. You should keep this, she said. It's yours. Cole looked at the coin. He looked at Clover. Something in his expression, which had been controlled and careful and managed, shifted in a way that was small and not small at all. That's your father's, he said. I know, she said, but it was a thank you. He gave it to you as a thank you, right? Cole did not confirm or deny this immediately. If you already had one, Clover continued, and he gave you another one, that means he really wanted you to have it. She turned the coin over in her fingers. I think you should keep it. The break in the surface happened slowly at first, and then all at once. Fletcher Dodd, who had spent the morning with his auction paddle and his expensive watch and his fund of ready condescension, lowered the paddle completely and put it on the empty chair beside him. He did not speak. He looked at Dodd's own hands as if they had become unfamiliar objects. Erica Nash clicked her pen closed. She set the clipboard on the registration table. She stood for a moment with her hands at her sides, looking at the platform, then at Cole, then at the registration table, and then she picked up the clipboard again and put it under her arm with the careful neutrality of a person attempting to appear as if they had not just reconsidered something significant. Liam Foster had not moved from his position behind the registration table. He was looking at the jam jar, Clover's jar, $23.47 in quarters and dimes and soft folded bills. And the expression on his face was the expression of a man conducting a private audit that is not going well. Ronald Briggs had not spoken in over 3 minutes, which was, by any measure, an unprecedented duration for a man whose professional function was continuous speech. He was still standing at the podium with his hand on the microphone, but the hand was resting on it now, not holding it, the way you rest your hand on a piece of furniture in a room where you are no longer sure of the correct protocol. Bradley Stone had not moved since Cole had told him to step back. He was standing approximately 6 feet from where that exchange had occurred, with his hands at his sides, and he was looking at Cole with an expression that was doing considerable internal work. In the front row, Grace Lawson was still standing. Samuel Park in the third row had his eyes closed. His lips were pressed together. He was the stillest person in the courtyard. Noah Wells, the Gazette photographer, had not raised his camera. He was simply watching with the trained attention of someone whose job is to identify the image that matters, and who has recognized that the image that matters is currently occurring but cannot be adequately contained in a frame. Asher Kim had his phone up. He was recording. His hand was steady in the way that young people's hands are steady when they are doing something automatic, and his face had the particular expression of a 12-year-old who is absorbing something he will not fully understand until much later. Iris Murphy stepped forward. She moved to stand beside Clover, not in front of Cole, not between them, but beside the girl, in the way a colleague steps in when the geometry of a situation needs one more person to be present. She looked at Cole and said, clearly enough for the people nearest to hear, March 14th, warehouse fire, North Harbor. 3 civilians extracted. The last officer on scene was Caleb Hayes, badge number 714. She paused. Rex's handler. Cole looked at her without particular surprise. He had known from the moment she took out her phone what she was looking for. The incident report marks your extraction as completed, Iris continued. It notes that Officer Hayes re-entered the structure after your extraction. The report closes with, and I'm quoting this directly, Officer Hayes did not exit the structure. She stopped. The last sentence had cost her something. She put that away and kept going. Rex was logged as recovered on scene. He was brought back to the department. He's been in holding since Caleb's funeral. She looked at Clover. 7 months. Clover was looking at Rex. Rex was looking at Cole. Cole had opened his palm again. Both coins were there, Caleb's and his own, side by side in the cup of his hand. He looked at them for a moment, then closed his fingers gently and looked at Clover. He made me promise something, Cole said. Before he went back in, Clover looked up at him. He made me promise that if he didn't, that I would find you. Cole's voice was even. Every word was placed deliberately. He said he had a daughter, 8 years old, name of Clover. He said she liked the color green and that she was the bravest person he knew. A pause. He said it in about 15 seconds. Then he went back in. Silence. Then Clover said, very quietly, in the tone of a child stating something that has recently become clear, "It took you a long time." "Yes," Cole said. "It did. I'm sorry for that." She considered this. "Why did it take so long?" "Because I didn't handle it right," he said. "When someone does something like that for you, when they give you something that costs them everything they have, it's not always easy to know what to do next. Sometimes you get it wrong for a while before you figure out the right thing." He paused. "I got it wrong for a while." Clover looked at him with the evaluative steadiness of a child who has been listening to adults explain things for her entire life and has developed a reliable sense for when the explanation is genuine. "Are you figuring out the right thing now?" she asked. "I'm trying to," Cole said. She nodded once. "Okay," she said, as if that settled it. Behind her, an involuntary sound moved through the crowd. Not a gasp, something lower, more interior, the sound of a group of people revising. What happened next took approximately 45 seconds and would be described in the Harlow Creek Gazette the following Thursday as the moment the auction ceased to be an auction. Cole straightened fully. He adjusted his jacket once. He looked at Briggs. "What is the minimum bid currently on the books?" he said. Briggs blinked. He looked at his paperwork. The opening bid was $4,000. We have a live bid at $11,500 from... "What is the minimum bid on the books?" Cole said again. Not a question, a specification. Briggs understood the distinction. $4,000. I'm registering a bid, Cole said, for the minimum, as documented. The sentence landed in the courtyard with the force of something both very simple and very complicated. Liam Foster opened his mouth. "Sir, the live bid is currently at $11,500. I heard you the first time," Cole said. He looked at Briggs, not at Foster. "I am registering a bid at the minimum documented amount. You will process that bid." Briggs looked at Foster. Foster looked at his clipboard. Fletcher Dodd, who had not spoken since Cole had produced the second coin, looked at his paddle, which was resting on the chair beside him, and did not reach for it. Nobody reached for a paddle. The silence that followed was the silence of people making a collective decision without consulting each other. The kind of decision that groups arrive at not through discussion, but through a simultaneous recognition that the moment has moved past the point where certain behaviors are available. The bidding had stopped. Not because it had been ruled out of order, because the people with paddles had chosen, one by one in the space of 10 seconds, to put them down. Erica Nash was the last. She held her paddle for 3 seconds after everyone else had set theirs aside. Then she placed it on the table, carefully, and clasped her hands in front of her. Briggs cleared his throat. "Bid registered," he said, "at $4,000. He looked around the courtyard. "Going once." A pause. "Going twice." Another pause. Longer. He looked at his gavel, looked at the platform, and then, for the first time all morning, did something entirely outside his professional script. He set the gavel down without bringing it down. "Sold," he said, "to—" "I'm sorry, sir, I don't have your registration." "Cole," said Cole. "Jasper Cole." Briggs wrote it down. Cole walked to the registration table. He did not go for his wallet. He stood at the table and he looked at the jam jar. Clover's jar, $23.47, still sitting where she had left it. And he picked it up with both hands. He turned to Clover. "This is yours," he said. "I don't understand," she said. "The bid is $4,000, Cole said. "I'm paying it." "This," he extended the jar toward her, "belongs to you. It always has." Clover looked at the jar. She looked at Cole. Then she reached out and took it, and the transaction, if it could be called that, was complete. Cole reached into his jacket. He removed a card, plain, white, embossed with a seal and a number, and set it on the registration table in front of Liam Foster. "For whatever paperwork you need," he said. Foster picked it up, looked at it, and a small change came over his face. The change of a man who has just read a rank he was not expecting. He set the card down carefully and reached for his pen. It was at this precise moment, with the paddle lowered and the gavel set and the bid registered at $4,000, that Cole did the thing that nobody in the Harlow Creek Civic Courtyard would ever fully agree on how to describe, though they would spend the better part of the next several years attempting it. He turned to face Clover Hayes. He squared his shoulders. His hands came to his sides. His feet came together, left to right, precisely, with the alignment of a man who has executed this movement 10,000 times and feels the correctness of it in the bones of his feet. He drew a single breath. And then Jasper Cole, Colonel, United States Marine Corps, retired, a man who had served on 4 continents and received citations that were classified and stood at attention in the presence of people who held genuine authority over life and death, brought his right hand up from his sword in a slow, deliberate arc and placed it, fingers pressed together, parallel to the ground, precisely at the level of his right eyebrow. A full salute. Parade ground formal, addressed to an 8-year-old girl in a faded green jacket, holding a glass jar. He held it. For 3 seconds he held it, and in those 3 seconds, the courtyard did something that courtyard had never done and would not do again. It did not make a sound. Not one person spoke or shifted or drew breath audibly. 200 people inhaled and forgot to exhale, and the silence that resulted was so complete that the sound of the wind moving through the decorative maple tree at the east corner of the Civic Building was audible for the first time all morning. Then the sound started. It did not start the way applause starts, from the front and spreading back. It started from everywhere simultaneously, the way sound starts when a structure shifts. Not directional, just present, suddenly and completely. Grace Lawson, who was already standing, made a sound that was not a word. Samuel Park, in the 3rd row, pressed his folded hands against his mouth. Daisy Turner, who had spent the morning managing her own composure with significant effort, stopped managing it. Asher Kim's phone was still recording, and his own face, in the corner of the frame, had the expression of someone watching something he will attempt to describe for the rest of his life and never quite get right. Hannah Cole, a woman in her late 40s who had been standing at the far edge of the gathering since before it began, having driven here with her husband that morning, and having known, when he asked her to come, that he was not coming for paperwork, pressed one hand flat against the center of her chest and breathed. Elijah Ross, who had been standing 2 rows behind Samuel Park since the opening of the auction, who had served alongside Caleb Hayes for 3 years, and had been the one to drive to the hospital on March 14th, 3 years ago, and sit in the waiting area until someone came out and told him. Elijah put his hand over his eyes, not to hide, just to have something solid to press against for a moment. Bradley Stone stood at attention without making a decision to do so. His body simply arrived there, pulled by the same reflex that Coles had operated on all morning. And Rex, sitting beside Clover, where he had positioned himself without being directed to, made the sound again. Low, single, certain. The sound of a working dog that has found the end of a long search. Clover did not cry. She stood very straight, straighter than she had stood all morning, as if something had transferred from the man in front of her through the air between them. And she looked at Cole's face, and she did not cry. And in not crying, she was the most composed person in the courtyard. Cole lowered his hand. He held Clover's gaze for a moment. Then he said quietly in a register that was just between them, "Your father was the bravest man I have ever met, Clover. In 30 years of service, in every context I have encountered the word." He paused. "I want you to understand that, not as something people say, as a fact." Clover held the jam jar against her chest. "He knew that," she said. "He didn't like when people said it, though." "I know," Cole said. She looked up at him. "How do you know?" "Because when I told him in the stairwell, when I told him what he was doing was incredibly brave." He said, Cole paused. He said, "I'm just doing my job, sir. Let's keep moving." Clover Hayes let out a sound that was not a laugh and not a sob, but something that lived exactly in between, and she pressed the jar tighter against her chest, and Rex pressed his side against her leg. And the courtyard, which had been attempting to recover its composure, understood that it was not going to succeed in the near term. What Colonel Cole did next became national news. What Clover said in response, 4 words, became the quote of the year. We're 30 seconds from the moment that silenced an entire crowd and made a decorated Marine break military bearing for the first time in 3 decades. If this story deserves to be seen, share it right now. One share brings it to someone who needs to hear it. Stay with us for the final 60 seconds. It's worth it. The next hour in the Harlow Creek Civic Courtyard operated outside the script of any public event anyone present could name a precedent for. Briggs stood at the podium for another 4 minutes, shuffling papers with the concentrated purpose of a man who has realized that the event has moved on without him and is adjusting to this with whatever dignity remains. Then he quietly stepped down from the platform, set his notes in a folder, and sat in the front row, which was the first time all morning that Ronald Briggs had been a member of the audience rather than its manager. Liam Foster processed the bid registration with a precision that was almost ceremonial, each form initialed, each line complete. And when he was done, he set the paperwork aside and looked at the jam jar still on his side of the table. After a moment, he lifted it carefully and set it on the edge nearest to where Clover was standing, with a deliberateness that was, under the circumstances, as close to an apology as paperwork allows. Fletcher Dodd collected his jacket from the chair, said nothing to anyone, and left. He was halfway to the parking area when he stopped. He stood there for a moment with his hands in his pockets, facing the parked cars. Then he turned around and walked back. He did not speak when he returned. He found an empty chair at the end of a row and sat in it. And he sat there for the remainder of the morning with the particular stillness of a man revising something fundamental. Erica Nash approached Fiona Marsh and said something that nobody nearby caught the full content of, but which ended with Nash setting her clipboard on the registration table and walking to an empty section of chairs. She had the expression of someone who has come to a meeting to win something and is calculating on the way home what winning would actually have cost. Iris Murphy waited for the immediate activity around Cole and Clover to settle slightly before she moved. She approached not Cole but Elijah Ross, and they spoke quietly for several minutes. She showing him the incident report on her phone, he nodding slowly at things he already knew. The two of them working through the facts with the shared efficiency of law enforcement officers processing information they find both clear and painful. When they were done, Elijah looked at Cole from across the courtyard with an expression that was not gratitude exactly. It was older than gratitude and more complicated. And then he looked away. Grace Lawson, who had been standing since before the salute, walked to where Cole was standing and extended her hand. She was in her mid-70s, silver-haired, with the posture of a person who served for 32 years, and kept the posture as a courtesy to the service afterward. Cole shook her hand. Neither of them spoke. The handshake lasted 3 seconds and communicated everything that the morning had established, and that words would only have diminished. Samuel Park came last of the people who approached Cole directly. He came without ceremony. simply walked up and stood beside him for a moment, the way he had earlier, at the fence. "I figured it out in March," he said, "when I saw the incident report in the paper. Your name was in the extracted list, and I recognized the rank." He looked at Clover, who was now sitting on the edge of the platform with Rex beside her, her hand in his coat, his chin resting on her knee. "I wondered when you'd come." "Took me a while to figure out the right approach," Cole said. "Paperwork," Samuel said. "Paperwork," Cole confirmed. Samuel looked at him sideways. "You could have just knocked on her door." "Yes," Cole said. "I could have." He was quiet for a moment. "But she came here today, which is better." Samuel Park looked at the girl and the dog sitting on the edge of the platform in the October light, and he made a sound that was approximately agreement. The paperwork took another 40 minutes. Fiona Marsh handled the transfer documentation for Rex with a thoroughness that reflected, in part, genuine professional care, and, in part, the sense, shared by everyone filling out forms in the vicinity, that the documentation needed to be right, every field complete, every signature in the correct location. When she was done, she unclipped the auction identification tag from Rex's collar and set it aside, and she reattached the collar that had been submitted with Rex's impound documentation, the one with the worn leather and the small metal plate that read Rex/Caleb Hayes/Badge 714. She crouched in front of Rex. "Good boy," she said, in the specific tone of a handler's completion, the tone that means the work is done and the work was done correctly. Rex looked at her. Then he looked at Clover, then he looked back at Fiona and waited. "Go ahead," Fiona said. Rex moved to Clover and sat beside her, and this time he did not maintain the formal posture of a dog in official positioning. He leaned. His full weight shifted toward her side, and Clover felt it. 88 pounds of dog deciding that the thing to do was be present, and she leaned back. Hugo Grant, the mayor of Harlow Creek, who had sat through the entire morning in the second row without speaking, stood and walked to the podium that Briggs had vacated. He did not use the microphone. He spoke at a volume sufficient for the courtyard and no more. "The city of Harlow Creek thanks all participants in today's event," he said. "This auction is closed." He paused for a moment. "That's all." And it was, by his own later admission, the best speech he had ever given. Cole found Elijah Ross near the east fence before leaving, and the two men spoke for 11 minutes. A conversation that was neither brief enough to be courtesy, nor long enough to resolve everything, which meant it was exactly the right length for that morning. Elijah told Cole things about Caleb that were not in the incident report, about the week before March 14th, about the way Caleb had talked about Clover in the break room, about the fact that Caleb had updated his locker combination the week of the incident and left the new combination on a slip of paper in Elijah's desk drawer with a note that said, "In case you need it," and no further explanation. Elijah still had the slip of paper. Cole listened to all of it without interruption. When Elijah was done, Cole said, "He trusted you." "I know," Elijah said. "I still think about that every day." "That's the right response," Cole said. They shook hands. It lasted 2 seconds. It was the handshake of two people who understand that some obligations do not expire, and that acknowledging this aloud, while sometimes necessary, is never adequate. Daisy Turner was on the phone when Cole walked past her. She had stepped away from the main gathering to take the call, and Cole heard one side of a conversation. "Amber, are you sitting down? I need you to know Clover is fine. She's completely fine, but I need to tell you something that happened this morning." A pause. "No, nothing is wrong. Amber, something went right." Another pause. "Rex is coming home." Cole stopped walking. He stood for a moment with his back to the courtyard, listening to the silence on Daisy's end of the call, which lasted several seconds, and which contained what he had driven an hour to try to return to one family. He started walking again. He reached the east corner of the courtyard where Hannah was waiting. She looked at his face, the way a person looks at the face of someone they have known for 27 years and have watched carry something without putting it down. And she said, "How did it go?" "I think it went right," Cole said. She took his hand, not his arm. His hand, the way you hold on to something you've been worried about. "Good," she said. "It's about time." They stood together at the edge of the courtyard for a moment, looking back at the space where the auction had been. The white plastic chairs were being stacked by 2 municipal employees who had arrived with a flatbed cart and were working with the brisk efficiency of people performing a routine task in a space where a non-routine event has just occurred, and who are making no comment about the discrepancy. The banner was still zip-tied to the chain-link fence. The platform was empty. The podium stood at a slightly different angle than it had at the start of the morning, as if the events of the last 2 hours had shifted it without anyone noticing. Clover was still on the edge of the platform. Rex was still beside her. Elijah Ross had walked over and was sitting on the platform 2 feet away, elbows on his knees, and the three of them, the man, the girl, and the dog, were sitting in the October morning light in the particular silence of people who have just been through something and are not yet ready to leave it. Cole took out his phone. He dialed a number that he had looked up 2 weeks ago and written in his notebook in capital letters, because it was the kind of number he had not wanted to misread. It rang 3 times. Then, "Fort Bragg K-9 Memorial Foundation, this is Rachel." "My name is Jasper Cole," he said. "I'd like to make an endowment in the name of an officer named Caleb Hayes, badge number 714, Harlow Creek Police Department." He paused. "I want it to be annual, and I want it to be in perpetuity." A pause on the line. Then, "One moment, sir, I'm going to connect you with our development office." He waited. Hannah stood beside him, still holding his hand. The line clicked. A new voice. "Mr. Cole, thank you for calling. Can you tell me a little about the officer you're honoring?" Cole looked across the courtyard to where Clover Hayes was sitting on the platform edge with Rex's head on her lap, and Elijah Ross's quiet presence beside her. The October light had moved again. It came in lower now, warmer, at the angle that late morning light takes on clear days in the mountains when the sky has decided to be generous. "Yes," Cole said. His name was Caleb Hayes. He was a police officer. He was a dog handler. He was a father. He paused. "And he told me once, about 30 seconds before he saved my life, that he was just doing his job." Cole was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to make sure that sentence matters for a long time." Clover felt the platform shift slightly as Elijah sat down beside her. She did not look up. She had her hand in Rex's coat, the deep, warm fur along the back of his neck, and Rex's chin was on her knee, and his eyes were half closed in the way that dogs' eyes close when they have found the situation acceptable and are permitting themselves to rest. "He was my partner," Elijah said. He did not explain who. He did not need to. "We worked together for 4 years. He was the best officer I knew." Clover kept her hand in Rex's coat. "He never thought he was the best," she said. "He always said there were better people. He was wrong about that," Elijah said. "But it was one of the few things he was wrong about." Clover looked at Rex. "Did he talk about me? At work?" Elijah looked at her sideways with the particular expression of an adult deciding how honest to be with a child and arriving at the correct answer. "Every day," he said. "At least once, usually more." Clover nodded slowly, filing this. "He told me about the jar," Elijah said. She looked up. "What jar?" "The one you've been saving in. He showed me a picture of it once on his phone. He said—" Elijah paused, smiled slightly, the kind of smile that is also a wince. "He said you were saving for something, and he wasn't allowed to know what, but that you counted it every Friday night on your bedroom floor and always looked completely serious about it." Clover looked at the jam jar, which she was holding in her lap beside Rex's head. "I was saving for a bike," she said. Elijah looked at the jar. He looked at Clover. He pressed his lips together for a moment. Then he said, "He would have loved that." "I know," she said. "He kept saying I'd outgrown the one I had." They sat in silence for a moment, the three of them, the man, the girl, the dog, in the way that people sit together when the thing that connects them is too large to keep talking about directly, and so they rest in it instead. Then Clover said, "What's going to happen to Rex now?" Elijah thought about this. "What do you want to happen to him?" She looked at Rex. Rex opened his eyes fully and looked back at her. The direct, serious gaze of an animal who is paying attention and means for you to know it. "I want him to come home," she said. "He's been in a building at the station for 7 months. He's never been in a building that long without BA. He needs to come home." "I'll make some calls today," Elijah said. "We'll get the transfer processed by end of week." Clover nodded once. "Thank you," she said, with the matter-of-fact brevity of someone who has learned that gratitude, expressed clearly and briefly, is more honest than gratitude that is elaborate. Elijah Ross looked at this 8-year-old girl sitting in the morning light with her father's dog's head in her lap and her father's challenge coin in the pocket of her faded green jacket. The coin that Cole had returned to her had pressed back into her hands when she tried to give it to him, saying, "He gave it to you. Everything your father gave, he gave to you. Keep it." Even Elijah Ross had thought about the slip of paper in his desk drawer with the locker combination on it, And he thought about the 7 months since March, and he thought about the word inadequate, and about how there are some debts that cannot be paid, and some absences that cannot be compensated for, and how the correct response to understanding this is not despair, but rather a clear-eyed commitment to doing the specific, concrete, available thing in front of you. The available thing, today, was making some calls. He would make them. The last person to approach Cole before he left the courtyard was Asher Kim. Asher was 12 years old, 4'10", and had been recording on his phone for most of the morning. He had also been recording the look on his own face in the corner of the frame for most of the morning, which he would not discover until he watched the footage back that evening, and would find, unexpectedly, more interesting than the main footage. He walked up to Cole with the direct, slightly formal manner of a kid who has been raised around people who value straightforwardness and has absorbed it. "My dad's a cop," he said. Cole looked at him. "I know," he said. "I can tell." Asher considered this. "How?" "The way you watched what happened," Cole said. "You weren't watching it like entertainment. You were watching it like someone who understands what it costs." Asher was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Is what you said true?" he asked. "About Clover's dad? All of it?" "Yes," Cole said. "All of it." Asher looked at Clover across the courtyard. Then he looked at Cole. "What should I do with the video?" he asked. "I recorded most of it." Cole thought about this for a moment. "That's your decision," he said. "But I'll tell you what your father would tell you, probably." "What?" "That the reason we document things is so that people who weren't there can understand what happened. And that the reason we do that is so that the things that matter, the things that cost something, don't get lost." He paused. "Whether you share it or not, make sure you understand what you recorded, not just what happened, what it means." Asher nodded slowly. He looked at his phone. Then he put it in his pocket. "One more thing," he said. "Yeah." "The dog," Asher said. "The way the dog stopped, in the middle of the courtyard, before anyone knew who you were." He paused, searching for the right words. "Was that... Did Rex know? Like, actually know? Or was it just a coincidence?" Cole looked at the German shepherd across the courtyard, still resting his chin on Clover's knee in the October light. "Rex was trained to find what matters and not let go of it," Cole said. "That's not coincidence. That's 6 years of work and one very good man who knew what he was building." He paused. "Real warriors don't advertise, and real working dogs don't confuse what they know with what other people can see yet." Asher Kim looked at Rex for a long time. Then he nodded. He extended his hand. Cole shook it. 2 seconds. Firm. The way you shake the hand of someone you are taking seriously." Asher walked away. He did not take his phone out. He just walked back toward the chairs, where his father, Officer Danny Kim, who had been sitting in the back row since the auction opened and had watched the entire morning unfold, with the specific private pride of a parent watching their child understand something real, was waiting. Clover was the last one standing in the courtyard when the municipal employees finished stacking the chairs. They had navigated around her with the professional courtesy of people who recognize when something is still in use. She was standing in the middle of the open space with Rex at her left side, heel position, though she hadn't asked him to take it, holding the jam jar in both hands and looking at the place where Cole had stood when he saluted her. The banner was still on the fence. K-9 Unit Retirement and Reallocation Auction. The words looked different in the late morning light than they had an hour ago. Not wrong exactly, just no longer about what had happened here. Daisy Turner came to stand beside her. "Your mom is on her way," she said. "She got someone to cover the last hour of her shift." Clover nodded. "How are you doing?" Daisy asked. Clover thought about the question with genuine seriousness, which was how she thought about most questions. "I'm okay," she said. "I thought today would be sad, but it was more..." She looked for the word. "More like something coming back." Daisy looked at her. "Yeah," she said. "That's exactly what it was." They stood together. Rex stood between them and slightly forward, in the attentive posture of a dog that has been on duty all morning and has no intention of stopping now. Clover looked at the coin in her palm, Caleb's, with the number and the 4 words. She turned it over once, then she closed her fingers around it. "Daisy," she said. "Yeah?" "The colonel. He said Bay knew he wasn't going to come back when he went in the 3rd time." She was quiet for a moment. "Did he know before that, like before the fire?" Daisy was quiet. "He left a combination to his locker," Clover said. Mr. Ross told me. He left it the week before. In Mr. Ross's desk, just in case. She looked at Rex. Ba was careful about things like that. Daisy put a hand on Clover's shoulder. She did not say the thing that adults usually say in this moment. The softening thing. The managing thing. She said, "Your dad was one of the most careful people I ever knew. And the most brave." "I know," Clover said. "He always said those were the same thing." Daisy looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "He was right." Clover looked up at the sky. It was fully clear now, the thin October blue of mountain mornings when the weather has decided to be straightforward about itself. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Rex. "Come on," she said. Rex stood. He took his position at her left heel, automatic and unhurried, and they walked together across the empty courtyard. The girl in the green jacket, the dog in the worn leather collar, the sun on both of them, toward the courtyard gate, where Amber Hayes's car would arrive in 6 minutes, and where a version of home was waiting that would be different from before, but would, in the ways that mattered, hold. Clover reached the gate. She stopped for a moment and turned back to look at the courtyard one more time. She looked at the spot where Cole had kneeled, the spot where Rex had sat and waited, the spot where the jam jar had been on the registration table, the spot where the podium still stood slightly angled, at the center of the empty space. She turned around and walked through the gate. Rex walked beside her. And if you had been standing at the right distance at the right moment, if you had been in the maple tree at the east corner or on the roof of the civic building looking down, you would have seen, in the open courtyard she left behind, $23.47 still sitting on the registration table. And you would have seen Liam Foster, who had not yet left, walk to the table, look at the jar for a long moment, and then pick it up and carry it through the courtyard gate in the direction the girl had gone. He didn't catch up to her, but he tried. 3 days later, Cole made a second phone call, not to the foundation. That call had been completed and the paperwork sent. This was a different number, one that Elijah Ross had texted him the previous evening, with a message that said only, "In case you want to." He stood in his kitchen, Fort Bragg behind him, Hannah reading in the next room, the coffee that had been hot 20 minutes ago sitting untouched on the counter, and he dialed. It rang 4 times. Then, "Hello?" A child's voice. Careful. "Clover," he said. "This is Jasper Cole." A pause. Then, "I know. Daisy said you might call. Is Rex settling in?" he asked. "He found Ba's boots," she said, "in the closet. He slept next to them last night." Cole was quiet for a moment. "That sounds right," he said. "Yeah," Clover said. "I thought so too." He said what he had called to say, that he had made arrangements with the foundation, that there would be a small ceremony in Caleb's name at the K-9 facility at Fort Bragg in the spring, that she and her mother were welcome if they wanted to come. No obligation. He said it clearly and without embellishment. When he was done, Clover said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "In the building, when Bay went back in the 3rd time." A pause. "Did he seem scared?" Cole considered this. He had considered it many times in 3 years, approaching it from different angles, and he had arrived, eventually, at the answer that was true rather than the answer that was comfortable. "No," he said. "He didn't." "Was he?" "I think," Cole said slowly, "that brave people and scared people are usually the same people. The fear doesn't go away. They just decide what matters more." He paused. "Your father had already decided, a long time before March 14th. A long pause. Then Clover Hayes said, with the directness of an 8-year-old who has already understood something that most adults spend their whole lives working toward. He chose right. 4 words. Cole sat with them for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah, he did." The video that Asher Kim had recorded, or rather the version that Noah Wells had filmed from a wider angle and submitted to the Gazette the following morning, ran as the lead piece of the Thursday edition. The headline was simple, "A Promise Kept." There were no subheadings, no pull quotes, no graphic elements, just the photograph that Noah had taken at the precise moment that Cole's salute reached its apex. His hand at his brow, Clover standing in front of him with the jam jar against her chest, Rex seated at her side, the courtyard full of standing, watching people behind them, and beneath it, 1,200 words that said what had happened and trusted the reader to understand why it mattered. The response that arrived at the Gazette over the next 72 hours required the editor to hire a temporary staffer just to manage the volume. The letters came from veterans, from parents, from dog owners, from people who had lost someone to a line-of-duty death, from people who had simply watched the footage that Asher's recording, shared with his father's permission, 4 words of caption added, "This happened in our town," accumulated across platforms in the way that true things sometimes do when they find enough people who needed to hear them. Amber Hayes read every one, not immediately. It took her 3 weeks, in the quiet of the night shift or the early morning before Clover was up, 20 or 30 at a time. She read them with the particular attention of a person who is looking, in the accounts of strangers, for confirmation that the thing she has been telling herself for 7 months is true. She found it in different words from different directions, in the letters of people she had never met and would never meet, who had felt in 20 minutes of a Wednesday morning in October something of what she had been carrying since March. She did not write back to any of them. She kept 3. One from a widow in Alabama whose husband had died in similar circumstances 14 years prior. One from a Marine who had served 2 tours and who wrote in a handwriting so precise it looked typeset that he had never personally met Caleb Hayes, but was confident he was the kind of person who would have been worth meeting. And one from a 12-year-old named Asher Kim, who had written to the paper in careful, unembellished sentences. I was at the auction. I recorded some of it on my phone. What I keep thinking about is the dog. The dog knew first. Before anyone figured it out, Rex already knew. My dad says that's what you train for, to find what matters before anyone tells you to. I think Officer Hayes must have been a very good trainer. Asher Kim, age 12. Amber had that one folded in the drawer of her bedside table, beside Caleb's backup badge and the photograph of the 2 of them at the harbor on a summer evening 3 years ago, before March, in the light. Clover came home from school on the Thursday the paper ran and found Rex at the door, which is where he was every day when she arrived, had been every day since Elijah Ross had driven him over in the department transport van, standing in heel position at the front door, with the patient formality of a dog who has been on duty all day and is choosing to maintain bearing through the completion of his assignment. She came in. She dropped her backpack. She crouched to Rex's level and looked at him. And he looked back at her, and she said, quietly, the way she said most things, "Good dog." Rex's tail made 3 slow sweeps. She stood up. She went to the kitchen. She set the jam jar, which she had put back on the windowsill above the sink, where it caught the afternoon light, in a way that scattered small coins of gold across the counter, and looked at it for a moment. Then she opened the cabinet, found the container of kibble, and measured out Rex's dinner with the calm competence of a person executing a known routine. Rex came and stood beside her and waited. She set the bowl down. He looked at it. He looked at her. He waited. "Go ahead," she said. He ate. She stood and watched him, with her hands at her sides and the late afternoon light coming in through the kitchen window, and somewhere in the house, the radio was on low. Her mother had left it on when she went to work, the way she always did, so the house would not be completely quiet when Clover arrived, and the sound of it moved through the rooms, like something that had always been there, or like something that had come back. She put her hand in her pocket. Her fingers closed around the coin. The weight of it was familiar now. She was learning its edges, the way the engraving felt under her thumb, the specific resistance of the brass, the 4 words, "No man left behind." She stood in the kitchen with her hand around the coin and Rex eating his dinner beside her, and she was entirely still, and she was 8 years old, and she was already in some way that had nothing to do with age, certain. Her father had chosen right. He always had.